This is Nerdist News.
Let's just get started, everybody. Let's bring up the man of the hour right now. Everybody, give it up for Grant Morrison. Also coming up to stage, Gotham Chopra, Sharad Devarajan. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hi.
How is the con treating you guys so far?
Oh, cruelly as usual. Making me walk up and down and sign things.
You guys have created a very lovely large format book called 18 Days. Why don't you go ahead and just tell me the inception of this book? How did you guys come together on this project? What drew you to the material? And you know, what did you identify in it that you wanted to be a part of?
Well, you can start.
Sure,
yeah. Started and then I'll take over.
No, I think, look, so we've always been sitting at the center of where we think, how do we tap into some of the great myths of the world from the East and bring them out to the world? When we look in this world of Lord of the Rings, Clash of the Titans, the Immortals, we see a lot of these, Greek and Western myths have prevailed and transcended. But, there are billions of people who are familiar with some of these other myths, the Odysseys and Iliads of the East, for example. And one of the greatest myths of the East is a story called the Mahabharata, which is known by over 1 billion people and has kind of defined Eastern thought in many ways. And more, when we met Grant years ago, we instantly found such a kinship that he was one of the few people that really had not only understood all of these global myths, but found ways to synthesize them and make them accessible in ways that no one has ever done before. And when we told him our passion of trying to do something with the Mahabharata, it was his passion as well. And I think it's one of those stories that has been a labor of love for all of us. It started as a book, and that book that we launched, it was the initial inception of the idea, but now we're turning it into an animated series that we're launching in partnership with YouTube. And it's going to be Grant's first web series, and it's going to be an opportunity to really bring this to millions around the world, Yeah.
Thank you.
So one of the great things about this book, and one of the great things you guys have brought to your comic book work, is the amount of culture that you guys always seem to make sure to include, and it seems to be a baseline element in a lot of the books you've all created, where you examine cultures and really look at what's causing all these things to go on. How much of that did you guys work through together on this, and how much of this book is going to make it into the series and really show that great skill that you guys have?
Well, pretty much, as far as I know, all of the book will make it into the series. I mean, everything that's in there will turn up.
Absolutely.
It's all represented, all the characters are there, the setup. And for me, what was really great about this story, and I've been interested in Mahabharata for a long time, back when I was doing the Invisibles, the Mahabharata formed part of the spine of that book. And there was basically one time when I was in India, and I saw the entire thing enacted with those shadow puppets. And it really fascinated me, so I got interested in the myth back then. And the interesting thing about it is that it presents a battle. It's a battle that occurs over 18 days, and it's basically the last battle of the age of humanity that preceded the one we live in now. Right now we live in, allegedly, the Kali Yuga, the Dark Age, the Age of Iron, where everything is fallen and destroyed and morality is gone. You know the old story. So I love the notion that there's this story about a battle that destroyed an age and destroyed a continent and destroyed a race of superhumans and paved the way for the world that we live in. And that battle itself also stands for every battle that people have ever fought. So it's got a kind of, it never runs out of date. The Mahabharata is about the battles that we're currently fighting in Iran and Afghanistan. And basically it's about every battle that every human's fought. It's about the battles that we fight inside our heads every day between duty and desire. And so it has a universal appeal, I think, and kind of updating it like this and drawing out the science fiction elements of it, I think just brings it into a much more contemporary mode, which hopefully will appeal to people across the entire world and not just the subcontinent.
You don't know how to scale down at all, do you?
I thought that was me scaling down. No, this is the biggest battle ever for the biggest audience ever.
One of the unique things about the book and the legend that you've added in is it's predating a lot of technology, but it's got its own science and it's got its own really elements there of, I'm double checking my notes, the super warriors, yeah. and it really has a lot of themes there that kind of get targeted by other people in other ways, but you're talking about a supposedly ancient civilization that's really bringing a lot of cool ideas to the table. How do you mesh that kind of technology with these graphic, you know, people have visualizations of how this story should be. Yeah. How do you balance that?
Well, one of the things we did was to deliberately say that we're not going to try and do a historical version of the story, because a lot of people have done historical versions. You know, basically the Mahabharata, the earliest parts of it were written in 400 BC, and so it's an old story, and it's a lot of people say it's about something that actually happened, and there's a lot of it. You know, you can find historical places that correspond to where the battle was fought. But what we want to do is take it completely into the mythic realm and into the realm of imagination, and so. Because the actual Mahabharata, if you read it, there are descriptions of technology that sound like precise descriptions of atomic weapons and tactical battlefield lasers. So it has a lot of strange stuff in there, you know, there's giant genetically engineered super elephants and all this kind of stuff. So it wasn't a big push to suddenly turn it into a sci-fi story set, you know, 10,000 years in the past. So it was very easy, all that technology was in there.
Oh, I mean,
story, you know, and
yeah.
It's there, but no one was ever able to explain why there's this precise description of how atomic weapons work in a story generated in the year 400 BC. So all we did was take that and make a lot of it really literal, and then say Mukesh created those beautiful visualizations that combine, you know, kind of current technology with this notion of decorative technology. So like these characters in the past, they don't just build a gun. The gun's created by craftsmen, so every gun is unique and every device
serviceable and fashionable.
Serviceable and fashionable and completely customized to its owner. So those we're kind of playing with these design elements of a culture that was they had a lot of time to make stuff, but at the same time they were making machines and bombs and weapons, but they're making them really beautifully. They can be museum pieces. You know?
I'm having a hard time focusing because I'm holding a really beautiful book.
I think, by the way, you know, part of what's beyond even the book, I mean, what's interesting about the times we live in is the collision of, well, science and technology has caught up to what spiritual and wisdom traditions have been talking about for thousands of years. And, you know, Grant, I mean, what's great about being at Comic-Con is, you know, I think Sharad and I are sort of like part of the tribe. Like, we all come here and we all feel finally like, you know, everybody cares about the same things we do. And Sharad and I have grown up and loved Grant's work. I mean, literally. So when we had a chance to sort of sit down and he was talking about this, and Grant was sort of telling us things about the way we grew up, and that he, you know, envisioned this story, the way he envisioned this. It was such sort of validation, I think, for our entire adolescence more than anything. So the book was like a no-brainer evolution out of that. And, you know, it really does capture some of these elements. And I'd say even in the last few years that we've been working on it, so much continues to happen that replicates that story. And that's what great mythology is.
Great books like this come from huge, big ideas. And you guys clearly have a bunch of them in here. What stands out as the thing where you're just like, this is such a great signature on this book that you really want people to grab a hold of?
Oh God, there's so much of it. Honestly, it's such a huge story. And like I say, it has genetically engineered giant albino elephants. You know, come on, that's enough. You could leave after you get that. But it has everything. You know, it has flying machines. It has amazing characters. It's sort of the best cast of characters of pretty much any myth,
Absolutely.
I think. And they're so human. It's very different from the myths in the West, where there are superhuman characters like Hercules or Achilles. But what the story in this one is that everything that makes them heroic winds up destroying them. And that's why I love it. It really fits the times, because it's looking at the heroic ideal. And then we have an 18 days war, and the war starts off where all these guys are trying to abide by the rules of war and chivalry and the whole thing, and by day 6 it's just all gone to hell, and it's a battlefield with millions of men dying, and wolves are ripping apart the dead, and the last guys are still trying to fight this war. So what it really does is it gets to the heart of the human condition, which is what I love about it. The characters are really flawed characters.
Absolutely.
And in that sense, in the way that we see how things can really go wrong in the midst of what seems like a huge fantasy battle, and you kind of expect this is about villains versus heroes. It's not. It's about humans against other humans and all the foibles and the mistakes that they make. So I guess that's what really makes it for me. I mean, there's so many great visuals. You know, the characters carry gigantic hammers that make Thor's hammer look like a little toffee smasher. So these guys are really packing, and they know how to fight, and they smash each other's thighs to bits, and they break each other's heads open. So honestly, it's got everything that every big fantasy story's got, but on a scale that I don't think has ever been seen before.
Well, and the other thing I think that's equally compelling is what Grant touched upon, is that it's about the gray. I think Western myths and Western stories are very defined by good and evil in very stark contrast, where, you know, a lot of Eastern myths, a lot of Eastern thinking is about the gray. The good and evil is in every man. So in this, the people who are the most just, the guy who is always tells the truth has to lie to win. You know, someone who is, you know, the most evil of beings, we can see something in him that is noble at times. You know, so this is about changing up what we perceive as good and evil and really staying in that gray, where the characters are much more complex. And, you know, more and more I think we're seeing that in a lot of fantasy, whether it's a Game of Thrones or anything else. But, you know, from the Lord of the Rings archetypes and everything else, Western myths have been primarily dictated and, you know, by a more stark contrast. Whereas I think the East has seen much more of that gray, and that's what Grant was able to capture so beautifully in this.
Out of curiosity and wondering, like, when you're dealing with these myths that, you know, for whatever reason the Western world may not be super familiar with, do you feel like you really want to make sure you're representing and sharing it in a way that it just opens dialogues? Like is that?
Well, look, I mean, to me, the biggest passion was growing up as a kid. I knew all these myths. A billion people knew all these myths, but we knew them in a certain way, and we knew them in, you know, just as a tale you've grown up with, and you've heard from the day you're old enough to understand language. But to bring it out now and to make these myths accessible, I think in the same way Clash of the Titans or Immortals. I mean, that's not a real retelling of the Greek Perseus myth, right? I mean, but I think you have to engage with these myths at the primal truths, which are about these characters. And, you know, at the core, the elements of these characters, their experience, their challenges, and that stays the truth. And the gray. And Mahabharata has been such a philosophical text for the East for so long because it really deals with what is one's duty. It's a story about family, a story about two families, one family that's divided that goes to war, and ultimately about a man at the center of that who has to lead armies to kill his cousins and feels these doubts, feels these moral pangs, but ultimately has to realize that he has to go beyond that. He has to do what he was born to do, even if that does mean, you know, leading this war. Right. So there's a lot of ambiguity in the character search.
So the last thing I'm going to ask, and then we'll turn it over to everybody. So, Grant, you've written so many things, from Batman to X-Men to just tons and tons of books, and each one has its own signature flavor. You can't necessarily write them all the same way. When you approach things, especially approaching something that's so long established, how do you come at that?
With something like this, you know, because obviously it's a gigantic story. It's, you know, what, 100,000.
Yeah, exactly.
It's immense. Apparently it's 10 times the length of the Odyssey and the Iliad put together, if you can imagine that. So in terms of mythology, this is the big one. And for me, a lot of it was trying to find the story in that, in the sense that Western storytelling is very different from Eastern storytelling, in the same way that Western music and scales are very different from Eastern scales. So if you want to learn to play sitar, you have to learn scales in a very different way and listen to music in a different way. So that's what I found with this one, is to go through this wealth of material, which Western scholars in the past have said, oh, this is incoherent, this has been compiled by so many authors, it makes no sense. But it does make sense, it's just a different type of music. And that for me was the way into it, was to hear that music and find a way to translate it back into the storytelling that I've learned from Hollywood and from comics, and to adapt it into a Western mode. And that was the real fun of it, you know, for the moment of finally figuring out how to do that, and finally getting that sound and realising, okay, wait, that character kind of represents Han Solo here, you know, and that character kind of represents Chewbacca, and to apply them to familiar Western archetypes so that all the characters could suddenly be understood by the Western imagination was the big thing for me and the big way into this book.
Great. And Gotham, I had one more question for you. You mentioned earlier you guys were fans of Grant for a very long time. Now that you've worked together, did anything come up that you just weren't ready for? What surprised you about the relationship?
That entire book is a plunge into the mind of Grant Morrison. And so, I mean, I don't think, you know, look, if everybody here, some of the books you mentioned, and, you know, his All-Star Superman and The Invisibles, probably like my favorite, you know, We3. You know, I think there's Grant's mind, and it's probably for a different talk, but when he talks about how he processes story, like story structure, I mean, it's like, you know, it's a total, can I swear? Because I was going to use a mind F. But, you know, it's...
Everybody knows what that means?
Yes.
Are we all on the same page? Awesome.
It's an awesome experience. If you are a storyteller or someone who appreciates stories, there is no better architect.
Or if you just want your mind effed.
Yeah, if you just want your mind effed.
All right,
guy.
Let's talk to some of the guys out in the audience. Who's got some questions? Raise your hand and Coy will find you. Hey man, what's your name?
Hey, I'm Adolfo Perez. And Grant, I know a lot of your books are about the power of ideas. Yeah. What do you think is the most powerful idea out there today?
The most...
He wants to know what's the most powerful idea in the world today?
The most powerful idea in the world today? Zombies. Goddamn zombies. I'm getting sick of dead people, honestly.
I share your sentiment.
So what you're saying is you don't want to walk over to the Walking Dead escape right now?
No, that's like my worst
Just on the other
nightmare
side
right
of Petco.
We need to see some Asian Indian zombies. We haven't crossed that
I
yet.
just want to see some dancing.
Actually, World War Z. That was a pretty interesting thing. They put them all over the world. So yeah. Who's next? Who's got the questions for the Grant Morrison and everybody else? One in the back.
How's it going?
Hey man.
My name's Steven Sklar. I just have a question for the 18 Days book. Are you gonna put it as a digital comic, like on Comixology?
So we're definitely going to launch it as a comic series as well, but the main thrust of it is as a free web series on YouTube. So yes, it will be on Comixology, hopefully. We'll figure out all the distribution platforms we want to get it out there, and in physical print as well, there'll be things. That book's on sale now, so anyone who wants to jump right into the world of 18 Days in the World of Grant, that's an amazing behind-the-scenes look at the entire process that we went here, and then the comic series itself will launch later in the year as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And the trailer's out now.
Yeah, so the first trailer for the series is up today. So, would encourage everyone to check out the Graphic India channel and take a look at it. And Nerdist, I believe, has posted it as well. So, we'll have it kind of reposted there. So.
Everybody should definitely stay tuned to Nerdist because we are big fans of this and we will be sharing a lot.
I think also, by the way, one of the cool things is like how this is all evolving. I mean, this is your first year, right, here, where you guys are doing... Or YouTube is doing this sort of thing in partnership. Yes,
this is the first year we've had this kind of thing, and we're all having a really good time and learning a lot and having a blast. But con is getting interesting, I think.
Yeah.
Well, it's transforming right in front of our eyes.
That's actually a very good question. How has the con changed for you and for you guys? You've all been coming for a while.
So I've been coming here for 25 years. When I started, there was just this one hotel, and a little guy dressed as Green Lantern being chased down the street by Marines. And now we're chasing the Marines down the street. And you can't tell the colonial Marines from the real Marines anymore. So it's really, it's exploded, obviously. And what's most noticeable is the way that our culture has colonized the wider culture. It's now taken over to the extent that entire cities can be colonized by the stuff that it used to only be us that were into. So I think that's the fascinating thing. So the world has come to accept the fantastic in a way that it just didn't before. Over the last 25 years, it's changed utterly. Imagine 25 years ago, you couldn't have got something like Game of Thrones on TV. It just wouldn't have happened. Now people can buy into that. People who are not even interested in fantasy will buy into it because of the characters and the stories, and hopefully that's how this will work as well.
Well, and I think, the opportunity to take Grant into the digital space through this, on, getting something out there as his first, web animated series, that's a whole new audience and a whole new way to engage with Grant's existing audience as well. So that's what we think is just fascinating about what we're seeing in all these multi-platforms today, of being able to build things.
All right, I saw a hand up.
Brian Benicki.
Hey.
Excuse me.
It looks fantastic, man.
So this is the Mahabharata, but just kind of superheroized and stuff like that?
What's that?
So this is the whole 18 Days is the story of the Mahabharata, but made into a superhero story?
Yeah, pretty much. We're playing the
So do you touch on that whole Ancient Aliens
thing? I'm going to
ban
white this.
Because I would see that thing on Ancient Aliens. The whole Mahabharata.
Yeah.
There's a touch
He
on
saw a lot of the ancient alien stuff on Mahabharata. He's saying, is that captured? Yeah.
Yeah, we're using all of that stuff, and we're kind of, as I say, we're just trying to bring out what was already there in the original story. So, the previous age had these fantastic warriors who had all kinds of powers. So we're actually just treating them as super warriors, and almost this is the next stage beyond the superhero. is the super warrior, the man born and bred to fight the ultimate war.
Nice.
I mean, but a lot, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, very broadly speaking, it's the story about 5 brothers who go to war with their 100 cousins. And so just right there, you have this massive ensemble cast. And each, in the original mythology, each of these characters represents certain archetypes. And I mean, I think we would all be agreed, and I think most people here, archetypal characters are what superheroes are. Superheroes are sort of the modern versions of a lot of these same type of gods and goddesses, both in Eastern and Western culture.
You'll even find like the character Karna, who's one of the best characters in Mahabharata, very conflicted man he's working for both sides almost, and he's fighting against his brothers. That character, like Superman, was placed in a basket and sent down the river like Moses. So Karna was the kind of original of that Superman idea of, a mother and father sending their son out down the river of destiny and hoping that his life will work out, and eventually he becomes this incredible figure at the center of mythology. So it's almost, we are drawn in very much the same archetypes as all the great stories of the past.
Yeah. The one thing also, when you say about the technology that you see when a lot of these documentaries go back and go to the ancient scriptures, I mean, it is fantastic how if you read the original myths, there are things called vimyanas that are described in such intricate detail about spaceships, about flying chariots, that are even blueprints in some cases of how to make them, right? That are so described in detail that it seems kind of so ahead of the time, even beyond our time today. Other weapons that he talked about too, Grant was referring to these kind of thermonuclear kind of weapons. There are these things called astras, which are the super weapons of the gods. And there are many different weapons that each one of these warriors has that are actually originally taken out straight from those books and brought and reinterpreted. But there are some that are atomic weapons and some that are even bigger nuclear weapons. And they're actually described with such vivid detail in the original Vedantas that they have a lot of that kind of parallel. Right. So there's something to be said for it. Yeah.
Nice.
I still want a genetically engineered elephant.
I
just want a genetically engineered elephant. It sounds so awesome.
It's out there.
There's a whole chapter in this where it's a genetically engineered elephant versus a guy with a hammer.
Where can you buy the
It's not Nathan Fillion, right? It's not Captain Hammer? Okay, now we're good.
Where can you buy the book?
So the book is available now on Amazon or anyone else if you just look it up 18 days. And the animated series, we just released the trailer for it today, and it's going to go live on August 5th on YouTube and be available free to the world.
So it's got all that, but it doesn't have zombies, right?
No zombies.
No zombies?
Yeah, no zombies.
Oh, okay.
Not yet.
There are super things and there are heroic things. So superheroes get covered.
Yeah.
That's
Super zombies.
So we've got the YouTube series coming, trailers up. Obviously, you guys seem to have enjoyed the collaboration. Something else you guys might be germinating? Any ideas?
No. Anything Grant wants to do, we just will say yes to. Let's put it that way. And
as I said, we're always talking about stuff because, as you say, we get on well and we like working together. But this is so immense that we have to get through this one first.
I was going to say, this is such a sprawling saga. I mean, I think it can go on forever and ever. Look, you have an ensemble cast to start with, about 120 characters. So there's a lot of different ways to go just with that.
So 5 brothers versus all their cousins.
5 brothers versus 100 cousins, but they both
this
got
take
armies.
place over the holidays.
Oh, well, of course. Like, you know how it works. They didn't call it Christmas then, but the same stuff happens.
Totally. Well, guys, a big round of applause for our panelists.
Thank you.